The tropical sun was barely breaking through the thick haze when Second Lieutenant Richard Ira Bong climbed into the cockpit of his P-38 Lightning on that December morning in 1942 at Port Moresby, New Guinea. His hands remained steady as he settled into the seat, his breathing controlled and measured, yet his thoughts swirled with premonitions that would echo through history. For a year, the Japanese had owned these skies without challenge. Today, that was about to shift. Through the plexiglass canopy, Bong watched 40 Japanese aircraft emerge from the clouds, their shapes growing larger as they pushed forward. Bombers traveled under the protection of the legendary Mitsubishi A6M-0 fighters that had caused countless Allied pilots to meet their end across the vast Pacific. The situation was brutal for the 12 American P-38s racing to meet them. What those Japanese pilots could never have anticipated was that among those dozen Americans flew a Wisconsin farm boy who would become their deepest nightmare. His name would soon carry weight and fear in Japanese briefing rooms scattered across the Pacific, from Rabaul to the Philippines. The art of air combat was about to transform. Not simply through the revolutionary twin-engine design of the Lightning, though it was indeed a marvel of engineering. Not purely through evolving American fighter tactics, though improvements were happening rapidly. Instead, it would be rewritten by one pilot whose natural gift, precision in calculation, and willingness to press forward would overturn everything the Japanese believed about American fighter pilots. Richard Bong had arrived in the Pacific. The Japanese Imperial Navy Air Service would face its reckoning. The beginning of Japan's air power collapse started not with speeches or announcements, but with 2 aircraft falling from the sky that humid morning near Buna. Flying alongside Captain Thomas Lynch with the 39th Fighter Squadron, Bong attacked the massive Japanese formation with calculated precision. His first target fell, a Zero, that supposedly unbeatable fighter that had cleared Allied aircraft from Pacific skies since Pearl Harbor struck. His second victim was a Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar, another highly respected Japanese fighter. 2 victories earned Bong the Silver Star, but the official citation could never capture what Japanese pilots witnessed that day. Among them was Petty Officer First Class Hiroshi Nakamura, whose combat report, discovered in Japanese archives decades later, revealed the first doubts creeping into Japanese confidence. The American twin-engine fighters coordinated their attacks in ways we had not witnessed before, he wrote. One pilot, his aircraft number unknown, possessed abilities matching our most seasoned aces. He rejected the dogfighting methods earlier American pilots had attempted. Instead, he wielded his machine's natural advantages, its speed and altitude, to control how the battle would unfold. This realization disturbed us profoundly. The story of the Wisconsin farm boy and America's most dangerous fighter pilot truly began years before, shaped by events that seemed ordinary until later viewed with the weight of what followed. Richard Ira Bong entered the world on September 24, 1920, in Superior, Wisconsin, the oldest among 9 children born to Carl Bong, a Swedish immigrant, and his wife Dora. Life on the family farm near Poplar was unpretentious, yet suffused with values that would mold Bong's entire being. One childhood moment altered everything. In 1928, President Calvin Coolidge chose Superior as his summer retreat. Military aircraft supporting the presidential compound flew directly above the Bong family farm, their engines roaring overhead. I knew right then that flying was my future, Bong would write years later in correspondence with his family. I took scrapwood and paper and constructed model aircraft. I devoured every aviation publication available. For me, flying was not merely a wish. It represented my fate. Yet the real foundation came from farm labor and Swedish immigrant parents who demanded absolute dedication to work. Bong proved himself an exceptional student, ranking 10th among 428 in his graduating class at Superior Central High School. Beyond academics, he lettered in baseball, basketball, and hockey, sang tenor in the church choir, and spent autumn hunting through Wisconsin forests, developing shooting accuracy that would become essential during aerial warfare. More significantly, he cultivated patience, keen observation, and analytical reasoning that would distinguish him from his peers in the cockpit. In 1938, Bong entered Superior State Teachers College intending to study engineering. Yet the pull of aviation proved stronger. He enrolled in the civilian pilot training program, making his solo flight on his 20th birthday, piloting a Piper Cub. The instructors immediately recognized his exceptional natural talent. He possessed that rare pilot's gift called situational awareness, the capacity to track numerous aircraft simultaneously, mentally calculate angles and velocities, and execute difficult decisions while managing extreme pressure. On May 29, 1941, 6 months before Pearl Harbor changed everything, Bong enlisted in the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program. Among his gunnery instructors at Luke Field in Arizona was Captain Barry Goldwater, who would later represent Arizona in the United States Senate. In conversations after the war, Goldwater recalled Bong with clarity. "He stood as the most naturally gifted pilot I ever encountered," Goldwater stated. During shooting exercises, he placed rounds on targets with accuracy exceeding even our best instructors. Yet what impressed me most was his capacity for thinking through problems. He didn't simply fire. He calculated, made corrections, and absorbed lessons from every pass. One P-38 Czech pilot, whose name has vanished into history, offered an assessment that proved prescient. "There's nothing anyone can do to prevent Bong from getting behind your tail," the instructor said. He flew an AT-6, among the slowest training machines available, yet he would position himself on my 6 o'clock while I operated a substantially faster aircraft. His comprehension of three-dimensional aerial tactics was something he just naturally grasped. On January 9, 1942, 1 month following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Second Lieutenant Richard Ira Bong earned his pilot wings and his officer's commission. The dream he held as a boy in Superior was now real, but instead of seeing combat, his remarkable shooting abilities resulted in an assignment training other pilots at Luke Field. While months passed and warfare consumed the Pacific Theater, Bong trained newcomers. The disappointment was severe, yet the instruction he provided proved invaluable later. Teaching forced him to explain and break down tactics and techniques that flowed naturally from his mind to his hands. In May 1942, Bong received reassignment to Hamilton Field in California to familiarize himself with the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. This twin-engine fighter, featuring distinctive twin booms and a central nacelle housing the pilot, represented something entirely foreign to most aviators. Equipped with two Allison V1710 engines, each delivering 1,425 horsepower, the Lightning achieved speeds of 414 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. The weapon suite included one 20mm cannon and four 50-caliber machine guns, all mounted in the nose, delivering concentrated, destructive firepower. Yet the Lightning demanded respect. While counter-rotating propellers solved torque complications, they created unusual handling behavior. Cockpit heating proved inadequate for operations at extreme altitude. The stick felt heavy when pushing speeds higher. Numerous pilots approached the aircraft with anxiety. Bong embraced it. He recognized that the P-38's velocity, climbing ability, and extended range made it precisely suited for Pacific warfare, where confrontations occurred across enormous stretches of ocean. His abilities manifested at Hamilton Field in ways that impressed and concerned his superiors simultaneously. On June 12, 1942, he dove low over a newly married pilot's residence, his propeller wash scattering yard debris everywhere. He piloted down Market Street in San Francisco at chimney level and snatched clotheslines in Oakland with his prop wash, sending laundry flying. General George C. Kenney, commanding the 4th Air Force, summoned Bong personally. The general's words became legendary. "You appear to love flying down Market Street. If that's your preference, I'd support that decision outside my Air Force. However, you will cease this behavior immediately, and I'm speaking literally," Kenney declared. Even as he delivered this reprimand, the general perceived something remarkable in this young aviator. "We needed individuals like this pilot," Kenney would record afterward. "Young men with aggression, bravery, and ability, the sort who would drive the fight forward when others retreated." When General Douglas MacArthur appointed Kenney to command the 5th Air Force in the South Pacific, Kenney selected 50 of his finest P-38 pilots, and Bong earned selection. September 1942 saw the general and the farm boy touch down in Australia. The Pacific War was acquiring its deadliest aerial hunter. The story unfolding would transform a talented aviator into a legend whispered with dread. Bong joined the 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th Fighter Group, nicknamed the Flying Knights, yet that unit continued operating Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, outdated machines standing no chance against Japanese Zeros. Rather than delay, Kenny placed Bong with the 39th Fighter Squadron of the 35th Fighter Group stationed at Port Moresby, where he could participate in operations while P-38 deliveries materialized. This assignment mattered enormously. Operating under Captain Thomas Lynch, Bong absorbed knowledge from one of the Pacific's emerging aces. Lynch understood that American pilots could never match Zeros in turning fights on equal footing. The Zero possessed superior turn capacity across low and medium altitude ranges. Its minimal weight permitted remarkable agility. The trade-off came from reduced velocity, missing armor, and limited structural resilience. Lynch shared the tactical philosophy that would characterize American fighter strategy in the Pacific: refuse to engage the Zero in its preferred turning environment, attack from above, diving at tremendous speed, unleash concentrated gunfire, then escape using the aircraft's speed superiority. Should the first strike miss, return to height and position for another run. Never permit the Zero to dictate your speed. Bong internalized these principles and created his personal refinements. He calculated bullet trajectory, led requirements, and approached speed like mathematical problems. Where others found maneuvering targets difficult to hit, Bong grasped that victory demanded proximity. So close that inaccuracy became impossible. December 27, 1942 became Bong's fire and blood beginning. 40 Japanese aircraft struck at Allied installations near Buna. 12 P-38s scrambled skyward. The odds favored Japan by more than 3-1. Conservative pilots might have chosen restraint. Bong perceived possibility. He and Lynch climbed into position above the Japanese column and dove into engagement with throttles fully advanced. His initial target was a Zero threatening Lynch. Bong banked sideways, aligned his nose weapons, and squeezed the trigger at close quarters. The Zero Arsitine erupted, its remains scattered across the humid air. 4 more Zeros converged toward Bong's position. He descended toward the jungle floor, his pursuers mirroring his path. At approximately 2 feet above the tallest jungle vegetation near Buna, Bong hauled back on the stick. The severe maneuver threw his airframe into tremendous stress, yet the P-38's rugged construction endured. 2 pursuing Zeros lacked the structural strength and pilot skill for the maneuver, slamming into the jungle canopy. Bong's work continued. As his aircraft leveled near treetop elevation, he identified a KID-3A Val dive bomber exiting its bombing run. This bomber was defenseless, slow, heavy with ordnance, vulnerable. Bong accelerated to point-blank distance and fired. The Val transformed into a blazing explosion. Too low for altitude recovery, Bong pointed his nose toward Port Moresby and skimmed across the terrain. His pulse hammered in his chest as his mind catalogued every detail of combat for future reference. 2 confirmed kills and 1 silver star resulted from that single engagement. Yet the psychological impact mattered more. Japanese pilots returning from that battle reported facing an American pilot whose talent rivaled their finest veterans. Initial reaction dismissed these accounts as combat distortion. Reality proved different. Over the subsequent 2 weeks, Bong demonstrated his debut was no accident. January 7, 1943, brought reports of a Japanese convoy navigating New Britain's southern coastline, pushing westward toward Salamaua. 48 American fighters launched skyward. Bong and Lynch, with 6 other P-38s, missed their meeting with P-40 fighter bombers, but instead encountered the convoy's fighter protection. Nakajima Ki-43, Oscar pilots maintaining careful watch. The action stretched across nearly 4 hours, spanning separate engagements. During the initial encounter at 13:15 hours, Bong tangled with an Oscar through a 5-minute duel, displaying his control and discipline. He rejected turning fights, instead using pitch and velocity to maintain superior positioning. When the Japanese pilot erred, pulling into Bong's sights rather than away, Bong reduced range to 50 yards and fired. The Oscar came apart. Following a fuel stop at Dobodura, Bong launched again with the P-38 formation bound for Leh, where 16 additional Japanese fighters appeared at 15:30 hours. Bong damaged 2 Oscars on his opening assault, using P-38 speed to knife through their formation. Climbing back to altitude, he reset himself and destroyed 1 Oscar on his return pass. The following morning, January 8, 1943, delivered the battle, officially confirming Bong as an ace. While guarding bombers, 8 P-38s encountered approximately 20 Japanese defenders. Japan held numerical advantage plus altitude. Military doctrine would have suggested disengagement against such unfavorable circumstances. Bong and his companions attacked regardless. The violent, swirling engagement that followed revealed why Bong was becoming legendary. He downed 1 fighter with an extended burst from 200 yards, a demanding deflection shot demanding accurate lead computation, while both aircraft twisted through the sky. This victory, his 5th confirmed, granted Bong ace status and the Distinguished Flying Cross. More significantly, it signaled to Japanese commanders that American pilots were acquiring the ability to fight effectively in the Pacific. By April 1943, merely 4 months of combat flight had yielded 10 Japanese aircraft destroyed, qualifying Bong as a double ace. His standing expanded among both American and Japanese pilots, who regularly reported encounters with a distinctive twin-boom fighter operated by someone displaying uncommon ability. The transformation from newcomer to ace happened swiftly yet methodically. Every mission contributed lessons Bong preserved mentally. He learned that the P-38's paired engines supplied not merely horsepower, but survival prospects. Repeatedly, pilots coaxed single engines back to base, following damage that would have doomed conventional fighters. He learned altitude represented survival. Whoever possessed the upper ground possessed the engagement. He understood that delay functioned as weaponry. Those pilots displaying patience and waiting for superior opportunities succeeded where impulsive adversaries struggled. Between combat flights, Bong's contributions transcended simply accumulating kills. He became an instructor, transmitting difficult-won understanding to arriving replacements stepping from transport aircraft, terrified and unprepared. He guided them through respecting zero performance without surrendering to apprehension. He instructed them in capitalizing on their aircraft's advantages: velocity, destructive capacity, structural strength, while recognizing its drawbacks: sluggish handling at low speeds and restricted roll response during high-velocity passes. His instructions stayed concrete and straightforward. The training missions he conducted with younger pilots revealed the essence of his tactical genius. He'd demonstrate the fundamentals with methodical precision. Climb above your target first. Position the sun at your back, turning the light into your greatest weapon, blinding anyone who looked up at you. Then comes the dive, full throttle downward, building speed until the aircraft screamed through the air. Don't aim where the enemy is right now. Think ahead. Calculate where they'll be when your rounds reach them. Fire-controlled bursts, 3 seconds maximum, short and deadly. Study your tracer fire carefully as it reaches out toward the target. Adjust your aim based on what you see. Once you pass through their altitude, keep descending. Let your velocity carry you lower. Then pull up and reset yourself for the next pass. Never stay slow and dogfight. That's how good pilots become dead pilots. His promotion to first lieutenant arrived in April 1943, marking both his combat successes and his growing reputation as someone who could teach what he knew. Yet satisfaction eluded him. 10 confirmed kills meant he'd survived and proven his abilities. Now he wanted something different. He wanted mastery. He wanted to show he was better than everyone else. The moment that would elevate him from accomplished pilot to someone others would speak of with reverence came on July 26, 1943, near Lee, in New Guinea. That morning brought 10 P-38s under his leadership sweeping northward, when roughly 20 Japanese aircraft appeared ahead. The sensible choice would have been to call for backup and hold altitude until reinforcements arrived. Bong chose differently. He pushed 3 consecutive attacks directly into the enemy formation. His first diving pass took 2 Japanese fighters, brief, accurate fire that dropped them from the sky. As he climbed back up to position himself for another pass, 15 additional Japanese fighters joined the battle from above. Suddenly, the Americans faced odds exceeding 3-1. Most commanders would have ordered their men to pull back. Bong ordered them forward. What happened next became the stuff of combat legend. Bong shot down 2 more fighters during his second assault, reaching 4 kills in a single day. Witnesses in his flight, pilots who filed reports that still sit in military records decades later, described his flying as flawless. His confidence seemed absolute. His aircraft placement was exact. He waited until victory was certain before pressing the trigger. He never wasted ammunition on unlikely shots. His awareness of what surrounded him remained extraordinary. He tracked multiple enemy planes at once while maintaining perfect discipline with his wingman. The engagement concluded with 10 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 4 confirmed as Bong's responsibility, while no American planes fell. For this action, he received the Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second highest award for battlefield courage. The official citation emphasized his extraordinary bravery and complete disregard for the overwhelming numbers opposing him. What statistics alone couldn't convey was the effect on Japanese pilots who survived. A Zero pilot named Lieutenant Kenji Okamoto wrote in his diary that same evening, words hidden away in Japanese archives until they opened decades later. We faced the American twin-engine fighter piloted by someone our intelligence identifies as the Ghost. This pilot attacks from angles we didn't think possible, always perfectly accurate. Our formation commanders now warn us about him specifically. They've ordered us that if we encounter a twin-engine fighter with red wingtips and a red nose, break off immediately and disengage. Sometimes disengagement doesn't come easily, though. The Ghost decides when fighting happens. We can only respond. By August 1943, his victory count reached 15 confirmed kills, and his rank advanced to captain. His reputation expanded beyond military channels into American newspapers hungry for war heroes. Yet he carried himself with genuine modesty, genuinely uncomfortable with the spotlight and recognition. His letters home, which his mother preserved carefully over the years, downplayed his accomplishments considerably. "I'm simply doing what every pilot here does. The P-38 is a wonderful machine. The real heroes wear uniforms on the ground, maintaining these aircraft under terrible circumstances." This humble approach concealed a sharp tactical mind honed through constant study. Following each sortie, he'd sit with intelligence officers and review everything that happened. He'd watch gun camera footage repeatedly, not celebrating what went right, but obsessing over what might improve. He discovered his most successful passes happened when he closed to distances of 100 yards or even 50 yards. At that proximity, even brief bursts found their targets reliably. His calculations showed he typically fired only 2 to 3 seconds per successful kill, proof that correct positioning mattered far more than extended shooting. What separated him from other excellent pilots was something else entirely. He never chased damaged planes deep into hostile territory. He wouldn't let the intoxication of victory override his judgment. If an engagement went badly, he'd break away cleanly, without hesitation or embarrassment. He understood that dead aviators remained dead, while living ones could fight tomorrow. His fellow pilots noticed another characteristic about how he flew. His wingmen stayed alive. In a profession where plenty of decorated aces accumulated victories while their wingmen died protecting them, his record stood as genuinely remarkable. He saw his wingmen as genuine partners, not expendable assets. He positioned them to support his attacks while keeping them safe from the worst danger. When his wingman damaged a target, he finished off. He'd sometimes credit the other pilot with the kill. This generosity created absolute loyalty among those who flew beside him. November 1943 brought orders from General Kenny, sending him stateside for 2 months' leave. The general's thinking was practical. Continuous combat for a year had worn him down. He needed rest. His combat experience could help develop better pilots and improve American tactics back home. But unofficially, Kenny harbored another concern he never voiced aloud. Losing him in combat would crush American morale badly. During his leave, he appeared at a homecoming event at Superior State Teachers College. There, he encountered Marjorie Vattendahl, an intelligent and beautiful student who would reshape his entire world in ways that combat couldn't touch. They began dating right away, and when he returned to combat zones in January 1944, he carried something irreplaceable: a large photograph of Marjorie positioned on the nose of his P-38 Lightning, which he named after her. While some pilots decorated their aircraft with suggestive artwork, he chose something respectful and meaningful. His sister would later remember. He wouldn't use those naked pictures some of the other pilots had painted on their planes. He had a real girl instead, beautiful and decent. His red-painted wingtips and engine nacelles stayed his identifying marks, instantly recognized and feared by Japanese pilots. Then March 1944 brought heartbreak. Another pilot, Second Lieutenant Thomas Malone, was flying the aircraft when engine problems struck over Papua New Guinea. The plane spiraled downward before crashing into a jungle ravine. Malone escaped with his life, but Marjorie vanished beneath thick vegetation, remaining lost for 8 decades. The loss hurt deeply, but he continued flying other P-38s, still carrying her photograph on the nose, still wearing his distinctive red markings. By April 1944, his tally had climbed to 27 confirmed victories, surpassing Captain Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26. Rickenbacker himself, previously America's supreme ace, sent him a handwritten note. "You've accomplished what I always hoped some American would do. You've become the greatest. Your bravery and skill bring honor to our Air Force and our country." American newspapers seized on the achievement instantly. Headlines announced the Wisconsin farm boy had become America's leading fighter ace. Life magazine published photographs. Radio broadcasts carried interviews. Newsreel cameras followed him constantly. Military leadership, seeing tremendous propaganda potential, promoted him to major and scheduled a 15-state war bond tour. Over 2 months, he visited training installations, addressed enormous crowds, and helped raise millions for the war effort. He spoke at manufacturing plants, reminding workers their production directly saved pilots like him. He appeared at hospitals, speaking gently with injured servicemen, offering real encouragement without false promises. Mayors handed him city keys at civic ceremonies while spectators roared approval. He absolutely despised every moment. Letters to Marge revealed his genuine misery. "I don't handle attention well, and speeches make me uncomfortable. I should be flying, not speaking on stages. My friends are still in combat. Every day away feels like I'm betraying them." His discomfort was authentic. Despite his record-breaking accomplishments, he viewed himself as simply a pilot executing his responsibilities. However, the tour accomplished its purpose. Bond sales increased wherever he traveled. Young men joined the military inspired by his example. Factory workers pushed harder, knowing pilots like him depended on their labor. The reserved farm boy became, despite his resistance, America's fighting spirit personified. General Kenny understood this reality even when Bong couldn't see it himself. His achievements extended beyond his personal aerial victories. He inspired thousands to work harder, fight longer, and give more. Kenny grasped Bong's feelings, but possessed greater strategic worries. Should he die in combat now, American spirits would plummet. The answer proved elegant. When Bong returned to the Pacific in September 1944, Kenny gave him headquarters responsibilities, teaching advanced gunnery. His orders explicitly permitted flying, but explicitly prohibited seeking combat. He'd develop other pilots and advance fighter methods, vital duties keeping him away from the deadliest engagements. Bong discovered the opening immediately. His orders prevented seeking combat. They didn't prevent engaging when combat appeared. Based at Tacloban's during the Philippines campaign, he somehow always seemed positioned perfectly when Japanese aircraft materialized. His kill total kept rising. 28 victories, 30, 35. The Philippines fighting during late 1944 gave plentiful opportunities. Japanese air strength had declined from 1942 levels, but still mounted serious opposition to MacArthur's advance. Kamikaze assaults had started, terrifying desperate attacks that horrified American sailors yet presented possibilities for interceptors like Bong, who could eliminate them before reaching the fleet. Every engagement received full documentation, gun camera recordings, and verification through multiple witnesses. No inflated claims existed. Every victory was confirmed genuine. His gun camera recordings, examined by military intelligence, displayed unwavering consistency. Brief controlled fire, usually 2 to 3 seconds. Close targets, frequently under 100 yards away. Immediate withdrawal using speed, disappearing before surrounding enemy fighters could react. Completely professional, completely effective, absolutely lethal. As his total approached 40, questions emerged about when permanent orders home would arrive. General Kenny faced a difficult choice. He wanted him breaking records and uplifting the nation, yet feared losing America's greatest ace to random enemy fire. The solution was reducing his sortie frequency while ensuring enough opportunities to achieve 40 kills, a symbolic total that would immortalize him. December 12, 1944, brought General Douglas MacArthur himself to Tacloban Airfield for a ceremony. MacArthur, famous for theatrical pronouncements, set aside his prepared text and spoke genuinely. Major Richard Ira Bong, who has commanded the skies from New Guinea to the Philippines, I now receive you into our most honored society, the courageous men wearing our nation's Congressional Medal of Honor. The airfield where he'd flown his closing missions became the ceremony location. Fighter aircraft positioned themselves in formal rows along the runway. Servicemen stood motionless in oppressive tropical humidity. MacArthur, recognizable by his sunglasses and khaki uniform, presented the medal with uncommon authentic feeling. He recognized Bong symbolized something transcending individual accomplishment. He demonstrated that American warriors matched and surpassed the finest enemies could produce. Newsreels distributed the footage nationwide. The modest pilot remained visibly uncomfortable while MacArthur fastened the Medal of Honor to his chest. The medal's citation provided extensive detail, documenting his 40 victories, his leadership qualities, his absolute commitment to duty, and his extraordinary battlefield courage. Yet words couldn't capture everything he'd done. His 40 aircraft weren't merely destroyed, he'd revolutionized American fighter methods, mentored countless replacement pilots. He demonstrated that intelligence and discipline could overcome numerical disadvantages against experienced opponents. 5 days later, December 17, 1944, he achieved his 40th and final aerial success over the Philippines. The encounter proceeded with characteristic precision. He dove against Japanese fighters, eliminated one target in a 3-second pass, then climbed away before other pilots could counterattack. Gun cameras captured the target exploding violently, its pilot without any survival opportunity. Achievement number 40. An American record nobody would subsequently surpass. Behind closed doors, both MacArthur and Kenny had settled the question. He'd accomplished sufficient. With 40 victories and the Medal of Honor, permanent rotation home would proceed before combat luck turned bad. The choice remained strategic and deeply personal. His death now would constitute propaganda catastrophe and genuine tragedy. He'd earned survival. January 1945 saw Major Richard Bong return to America as the nation's most famous fighter pilot. Newspapers covered his return extensively. Every publication printed his story. Radio programs requested interviews. The moment newsreels flickered across theater screens, audiences saw footage of his Medal of Honor presentation. But what truly captivated Americans wasn't the ceremony itself. They wanted something more personal. They wanted to know about Marge. On February 10, 1945, Richard Bong and Marjorie Vartendal exchanged vows in Superior, Wisconsin. The wedding became a spectacle of press attention and public fascination. Hundreds of well-wishers gathered as the news dominated front pages across the nation. The occasion was intimate yet magnificent, holding fast to the couple's small-town roots while radiating genuine affection between two people deeply in love. At Concordia Lutheran Church in Superior, the ceremony unfolded with quiet elegance. Marge glided down the aisle in a traditional white gown, resplendent and radiant. Dick stood waiting in his Army Air Force's dress uniform, his Medal of Honor gleaming at his chest. Squadron mates who managed to attend filled the groomsmen positions. The church swelled to capacity with family, friends, neighbors, and reporters hungrily capturing every detail for a nation starved for uplifting news after years of grinding warfare. For Bong, 3 years of relentless combat suddenly felt distant. This moment represented something else entirely. Here stood peace, normalcy, and a tomorrow beyond the endless sky battles. Standing before hundreds of witnesses, he spoke his vows with conviction. He promised Marge safety, a home they would build together, a family they would raise, a career in aviation that would never demand he stare death in the face again. The promises were simple, yet profound, coming from a man who had lived with mortality as his constant shadow for 36 months. The reception erupted into celebration. Toasts rang out, stories brought laughter, and joy filled every corner of the room. For several hours, the war seemed to belong to another world entirely. Bong danced with his bride, smiled for photographers, and allowed himself to believe in a different future. His greatest struggles ahead would be civilian matters, not life-or-death contests at 20,000 feet. The couple traveled to California for their honeymoon, where Bong had already accepted work as a test pilot with Lockheed Aircraft Corporation. His wartime experience made him invaluable for assessing new fighter prototypes. He would shepherd development of the next generation of American fighters, particularly the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. The assignment seemed tailor-made for someone of his talents and background. Test flying promised challenge and stimulation without the lethal hazards of aerial combat. Here was a path to build a future with Marge while advancing aviation technology. Yet experimental jets in 1945 carried their own dangers. The technology represented the cutting edge, the performance was revolutionary, but reliability remained uncertain. Jet engines behaved unpredictably, control systems felt foreign to pilots trained on conventional aircraft. Safety protocols were still being hammered out through actual experience, through trial and error in the air. Every flight into the stratosphere carried serious risk. On August 6, 1945, Bong arrived at Lockheed's Burbank facility for what appeared to be a routine acceptance flight. The aircraft waiting for him was a P-80, serial number 448548. He had accumulated 4 hours and 15 minutes total time in P-80s across a dozen previous flights. By test pilot standards, he was still learning the aircraft's personality and tendencies. By combat pilot standards, he possessed comfort and confidence. The P-80 Shooting Star embodied America's aviation future. Capable of reaching 594 miles per hour, it dramatically exceeded the speed of any conventional fighter. The sleek profile, with its jet engine buried deep in the fuselage and air intakes positioned along the sides, represented a revolutionary departure from everything Bong had ever flown. Yet the technology was so novel that procedures remained fluid, still being refined through actual operational deployment. Each test flight added crucial information to humanity's growing understanding of jet aircraft. The pre-flight inspection turned up nothing amiss. Bong lit the Allison J-33 turbojet engine, and it roared to life normally. The engine's high-pitched whine differed sharply from the thunderous rumble of piston engines that had accompanied his entire combat career. He taxied toward runway 15 and received clearance for takeoff at 14:30 hours. Watching from the ground, observers saw the lean jet begin its acceleration roll. The speed built impressively, the P-80 quickly reaching rotation velocity. Bong eased back on the stick, and the aircraft lifted cleanly into the afternoon sky, climbing steadily. At roughly 300 feet, those watching from below noticed it first: black smoke puffing from the engine. The aircraft rolled right, then momentarily steadied itself. The canopy suddenly blew free and tumbled earthward. Bong was ejecting. In that instant, the engine died completely. The P-80's nose pitched downward into a desperate dive. Bong rocketed free of the cockpit, but his altitude was critically insufficient, perhaps 200 feet above the ground. His parachute deployed with a snap, the canopy blossoming open. The physics of the moment, however, were merciless. There was simply too little altitude, too little time. His descent could not be arrested. He struck Earth at high velocity where Oxnard Street intersected Satsuma Avenue in Burbank. The P-80 slammed into the ground seconds later, its nose pointing downward at an extreme angle. Fuel ignited on impact, flames erupting skyward. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but Bong was already gone. The impact had killed him instantly. The subsequent investigation revealed that the primary fuel pump had failed during the takeoff sequence. A secondary pump existed, mounted on the left side of the cockpit console. Activating it required flipping a switch that would have demanded Bong's attention while he simultaneously fought engine failure, battled for aircraft control, and made the ejection decision. The investigators could never determine if Bong had simply forgotten the auxiliary pump in the emergency, or if the switch remained beyond his reach before he ejected. Captain Ray Crawford, another test pilot, later recalled that Bong had once mentioned overlooking the auxiliary pump during an earlier flight when the primary pump temporarily malfunctioned. Bong had caught and corrected the situation mid-flight with no incident, but the pilot community had been warned explicitly never to repeat such oversights. In the unforgiving realm of experimental aircraft testing, you rarely received second chances. News of Bong's death reached the American public on August 7, 1945. Newspapers prominently displayed the announcement, many positioning it directly beneath headlines screaming about the atomic bomb's destruction of Hiroshima the previous day. The irony cut like a blade. Major Richard Ira Bong had endured 3 years battling the Japanese Imperial Air Force. He had flown over 200 missions, engaged in hundreds of aerial combats, and returned without a scratch. Then he perished testing an American machine in California on the very day an atomic weapon announced the war's imminent conclusion. Marge Bong was shattered. Their marriage was barely half a year old. Their life together had only just begun. Decades later, when she spoke about that August day, the pain remained raw and unhealed. Dick made it through everything the Japanese threw at him. He came home to me. We had plans. We were building something together. And then, in a single moment, it vanished. The cruelty of it never leaves me. Chuck Yeager, who would become America's most celebrated test pilot by achieving supersonic flight 2 years afterward, reflected on Bong's death in his memoir. He observed that test pilots of that era typically processed frequent losses through anger rather than grief, a psychological mechanism to survive the staggering mortality rates. But Bong's death struck deeper than most. He was supposed to make it. He had earned survival through remarkable skill and extraordinary courage. His death seemed to defy all justice. The funeral in Superior, Wisconsin, drew thousands of mourners who came to pay respects. Military honor guards stood sentinel beside the casket. General Kenny himself attended, his anguish plainly visible. Marge walked behind the casket, steadied by family members surrounding her, her expression one of carefully maintained composure, masking profound devastation. The small rural community that had sent its most celebrated son off to war received him back for burial, though not in any way they had imagined. Major Richard Ira Bong was merely 24 years old, yet his impact transcended the final victory count of 40 confirmed kills. His combat tactics became mandatory curriculum in fighter pilot training programs. The strategies he developed, managing energy in flight, utilizing altitude advantage, executing boom and zoom attacks, delivering precise gunfire at close range, became official doctrine taught to every American fighter pilot for the following decades. He proved that American pilots, when properly trained and equipped, could outmatch anything Japan's Air Force could deploy. The impact on Japanese pilots' psychology proved equally profound. Saburo Sakai, Japan's greatest surviving ace with 64 confirmed kills, offered extensive commentary about American opponents in post-war conversations. His words were brutally straightforward. The P-38 would hover above the altitude ceiling where the Zero could reach. Their extraordinary high-altitude speed permitted them to maneuver into positions of complete superiority. Then the twin-boomed fighters would plunge downward from altitude to devastate the Zero formations below. The P-38s possessed an utterly enviable advantage. They could dictate when and where battle would occur, choosing ground that favored their strengths. Facing such conditions, the Lightning emerged as one of the most terrifying adversaries Zero pilots confronted. The P-38 methodically destroyed the psychological edge that Zero pilots had always possessed. Bong's decorations during his abbreviated career reflected his extraordinary accomplishments. America's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 7 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 15 Air Medals. In total, 27 medals recognizing valor and achievement. Yet people who knew him remembered one refrain he repeated constantly, humbly: "We are simply doing our job." In the decades following the end of World War II, Richard Bong became honored through countless memorials across America. Superior, Wisconsin's airport received his name. Richard Bong Airport, the Richard Farr Bong Veterans Historical Center, opened in Superior, displaying exhibits dedicated to Bong and countless other American veterans. Superior Central High School established a Bong Memorial Room, showcasing his uniform, medals, photographs, and personal items. Outside that building stands a meticulously restored P-38 Lightning, nearly identical to the one Bong piloted to legendary status. His name graces streets, bridges, and buildings nationwide. In 1986, 4 decades after his death, Richard Bong received posthumous induction into the National Aviation Hall of Fame. The ceremony brought together elderly former squadron mates, now gray-haired and weathered, still carrying memories of flying alongside him. Colonel Gerald Johnson, who served with Bong in the 49th Fighter Group, delivered words at the induction ceremony. "Dick Bong was the finest pilot I have ever encountered. Yet that is not what we honor him for. We remember him because he made us all superior pilots. He taught us the art of survival. He demonstrated that analytical approach and precise technique defeated raw power and aggression. He proved that focused preparation and unwavering determination could overcome any obstacle. Flying with him was an unearned privilege." The discovery of Bong's crashed P-38 in May 2004 provided resolution to an 8-decade mystery. On May 16, 2024, a joint team from the Richard Ira Bong Veterans Historical Center and Pacific Rex located aircraft wreckage in a ravine within Papua New Guinea's Madang province. Among the debris lay 2 engines partially buried, their red paint still visible on the propeller hubs. Bong's sister, Jerry Fechtel Cotter, now 99 years old, expressed profound satisfaction at discovering her brother's final resting place. Bong's combat statistics compose a narrative of unparalleled achievement. 40 confirmed aerial victories, a record that endures today, surpassing every American pilot. Over 200 combat missions completed, more than 500 hours accumulating combat flight experience. 0 wingmen lost under his direct command. These figures establish Bong as not simply America's top ace, but among history's most effective fighter pilots. Thomas Maguire, who flew beside Bong and finished as America's second-ranking ace with 38 kills, articulated what distinguished Bong from ordinary pilots. Dick was never flashy in the cockpit. He avoided unnecessary aerobatics. He refused reckless gambles, but he positioned his aircraft with perfect precision, released his fire at precisely the optimal instant, and never squandered ammunition. He approached aerial combat as one would tackle an engineering challenge. Calculate trajectories, close the gap, eliminate the adversary, exit safely. Pure methodology imposed upon chaos. In the 79 years since Bong's death, no American pilot has surpassed his 40 victories. This was not for want of opportunity. American aviators participated in Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf War, and many other conflicts. Aerial warfare itself transformed, however. Jets made engagements faster and more compressed. Missiles became primary weapons, replacing guns. Air battles concluded quickly, restricting opportunities for individual pilots to accumulate substantial victory totals. Bong's record endures as a testament to a vanished era of air combat, a historical artifact from a different age of warfare. For Marge Bong, who eventually remarried and became Marge Drucker, her first husband remained woven throughout the fabric of her entire existence. She devoted herself to advocating for military veterans and promoting military history education. She played a pivotal role in founding the Richard I Bong Veterans Historical Center and worked tirelessly ensuring Dick's legacy would continue inspiring succeeding generations. Late in her life, Marge composed a reflection on her abbreviated marriage. World War II represented a historical moment when probably the strongest patriotic feeling gripped the ordinary American. Countless individuals lived through World War II and felt this powerful sentiment. They are still with us and possess the capacity to share their experiences with younger people. Dick's words were always simple: "We are just doing our job." Through the Heritage Center, we continue that job, offering appropriate recognition to all the exceptional individuals who emerged from World War II as heroes. Richard Ira Bong flew his final combat mission on December 17, 1944. He died testing an experimental jet aircraft on August 6, 1945. His lifespan measured only 24 years, his marriage lasted less than half a year, his combat tenure spanned fewer than 36 months. Yet in that narrow window of time, he revolutionized aerial warfare, shaped tactical doctrine, motivated generations of fighter pilots, and secured his place in American military legend. Major Richard Ira Bong accumulated 40 aerial victories during his combat years, but that achievement only scratches the surface of his true significance. He proved that disciplined thinking and calculated tactics outweighed raw physical aggression. He demonstrated that superior technology means little without competent operators wielding it. He established excellence as an attainable standard that continues inspiring people today. Japanese pilots feared him with justification. He represented the finest opposition they ever encountered. The aviator who commanded the skies across New Guinea and the Philippines. The recognized ace of aces, America's most lethal fighter pilot, remains an unforgotten figure in the annals of aerial combat.